The world is made of friction and sound, but in this basement, I've managed to turn it all into a hum. My name is Thea, and I am a collector of silences. I work at the Needle and Bean, a place where the air stays thick with the scent of roasted Arabica and the grounding smell of old paper. People come here to hide. They bring their broken hearts and their unread books, and I serve them liquid comfort in heavy ceramic mugs. I don't speak unless the order requires it. My voice feels like an instrument I've forgotten how to tune, so I use the steam wand instead. I scream through the milk. I whisper through the pour. Every cup is a canvas. I've learned that people will tell you their entire life story if you just look at them long enough while you're grinding the beans. I see the tension in their shoulders, the way they check their phones, the way they avoid their own reflections in the glass. I give them what they need, not just what they order. A swan for the girl who feels ugly, a storm cloud for the man who is too angry to cry. I thought I had mastered the art of being invisible while being essential. I thought I was safe behind this mahogany counter, protected by the hiss of the espresso machine and the steady, rhythmic scratch of the vinyl records spinning behind me. But then came Romy. She didn't just walk in. She disrupted the very molecular structure of the room. It was 7 o'clock on a Tuesday, the kind of evening where the rain turns the Portland streets into a blurred watercolor of gray and neon. The bell rang, a sharp, brassy note, and the cold air followed her in. She was a vision of chaotic elegance, short, dark hair that looked like she'd cut it herself with kitchen scissors, a vintage leather coat that had seen too many airports, and lips that were the exact color of a forbidden fruit. She was carrying a suitcase that looked like it held 1,000 secrets, and she walked toward the counter with a stride that suggested she owned every shadow in the building. "I've heard the best art in the city isn't in the galleries," she said, her voice a low, honeyed rasp that made the hair on my arms stand up. "I heard it's at the bottom of a cup in a basement." I didn't look up immediately. I focused on the basket, leveling the grounds with a shaking hand. "What can I get you?" I asked, my voice sounding thin and unused in my own ears. "Something impossible," she replied, leaning against the counter, her presence overwhelming the smell of the coffee. A triple-shot ristretto, almond milk stretched to the point of breaking, a hint of sea salt, and the essence of a rainy night. "Can you do that, Thea?" She read my name tag as if it were a lyric she was memorizing. I finally looked at her. Her eyes were dark, restless, and filled with a terrifying intelligence. She wasn't just ordering coffee. She was issuing a challenge. I turned back to the machine, the heat from the boiler hitting my face. I worked in silence, my mind racing. I didn't just make her a latte. I made her a poem. I poured the milk slowly, creating a dark, swirling whirlpool that ended in the shape of a single, shattered record. When I slid the cup across the wood, she didn't pick it up. She leaned in closer, her face inches from mine, the scent of her perfume, cloves and rain, filling my senses. "You're an introvert, aren't you?" she whispered. "You hide behind the steam, but your hands are telling a very different story." She took the coffee to the corner booth, the one where the light from the Edison bulb barely reaches. I watched her from the corner of my eye as I cleaned the steam wand. She didn't look at her phone. She didn't read a book. She just sat there, staring at the art in her cup, her fingers drumming a restless rhythm on the tabletop. When she left, an hour later, she didn't say goodbye, but on the table, next to the empty mug, was a white napkin. I walked over, my heart hammering against my ribs. I picked up the paper. It wasn't a phone number. It was 4 lines of lyrics, written in a bold, sweeping hand. "The girl with the cocoa hair and the silver in her nose keeps the world at bay with a pour and a pose. But the steam reveals what the silence tries to keep. A heart that's too wide and a dream that's too deep. I stared at the words until they blurred. She had seen me, not the version of me I presented to the world, but the version I hid in the foam. I folded the napkin carefully and tucked it into the pocket of my oversized sweater. It felt heavy. It felt like a beginning. The next day was a blur of anticipation. Every time the door opened, I felt a jolt of electricity. I found myself obsessing over the details of my station, polishing the chrome until it shone like a mirror, organizing the vinyl sleeves by mood rather than genre. I was preparing for a performance I didn't know I was giving. I spent 3 hours experimenting with the texture of the milk, trying to find a way to make it hold a line even finer than before. I wanted to answer her. I wanted to write back in the only language I knew. When 7 o'clock finally arrived, the rain had turned into a steady, rhythmic drumming against the pavement outside. The shop was nearly empty, just a few students buried in their laptops, and the usual lonely soul in the back corner. Then, the bell. Romy entered like a storm that refused to be calmed. She wore a bright yellow slicker today, dripping water all over my clean floor. But I didn't care. She sat directly at the bar this time, not the booth. She looked tired, the dark circles under her eyes more pronounced, but her smile was as sharp as ever. "Tonight," she said, tapping her fingers on the mahogany, "I want something that tastes like a long-distance call to a city you can't go back to. Bitter, but with a lingering sweetness that hurts." I nodded, my throat too tight for words. I pulled a double shot of the darkest roast we had, added a touch of honey, and a hint of smoked sea salt. I poured the milk with agonizing slowness, crafting the silhouette of a bird in mid-flight, its wings clipping the edge of the cup. She watched my hands with an intensity that made my skin tingle. "You have the hands of a musician, Thea," she murmured, taking the cup. "The way you hold the pitcher, the way you adjust the dial, it's all rhythm. It's all tempo. Why are you making coffee when you should be making noise?" "Noise is loud," I whispered, finally meeting her gaze. "Coffee is quiet. I like quiet." "Quiet is just a place to hide," she countered, taking a sip. Her eyes widened at the salt and smoke. "God, you're good. You caught it. The regret, the distance. It's all in there." She stayed for 3 hours that night. We didn't talk much more, but the silence between us was different. It wasn't the empty silence of a basement. It was the expectant silence between tracks on a record. When she left, there was no napkin. Instead, she left a small, silver plectrum on the counter, a guitar pick. I picked it up, the metal still warm from her pocket. It was scratched and worn, used 1,000 times to pull music out of steel strings. I realized then that she wasn't just a customer, she was a mirror, and for the first time in years, I didn't want to hide from what I saw. By Thursday, the air in the cafe felt charged, like the moments before a needle drops onto a dusty groove. I found myself checking my reflection in the chrome of the espresso machine, smoothing down my cocoa-colored hair, and adjusting the small silver ring in my nose. I was waiting for 7 o'clock, like a person waiting for oxygen. The routine of the shop, the grinding, the tamping, the steaming, had become a countdown. When Romy arrived, she didn't wear the yellow slicker. She wore a thin black velvet jacket that looked like it had been slept in on a tour bus. She looked frayed at the edges, her red lipstick slightly smudged, but her energy was still a high-voltage wire. She sat at the bar and didn't order. She just stared at the record player. "It's skipping," she said, her voice like crushed velvet. "The track. It's stuck in a loop." I looked over. She was right. The old blues record was caught on a scratch, repeating the same mournful guitar lick over and over. I moved to fix it, but she caught my wrist. Her skin was hot, buzzing with a restless caffeine hum. "Leave it," she whispered. "Sometimes the loop is the only honest part of the song. It's where you stay, when you're too afraid to see the ending. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the exhaustion behind the bravado. She wasn't just a singer. She was a woman running out of places to land. I gently pulled my arm away and started making a drink without her asking. A heavy, dark mocha with a double dose of cinnamon and a pinch of cayenne. Heat to wake her up, sweetness to keep her here. On the surface, I etched a tiny, perfect spiral, a record that would never end. "You're doing it again," she said, watching the milk settle. "You're reading my mind through the beans. It's a terrifying gift, Thea. Does it ever get lonely, knowing everyone's secrets while you keep your own locked in a vault?" "The vault is safe," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "In here, nothing breaks. The records play, the coffee pours, and the rain stays on the other side of the glass. Why would I want anything else?" Romy took a long, slow sip, her eyes never leaving mine. "Because the rain is where the life is. The vault isn't a sanctuary. It's a coffin. You're a masterpiece covered in a dust sheet, and it's driving me crazy." She reached into her bag and pulled out a crumpled flyer. It was for a gig at a place called the Basement Pulse, a notorious dive bar known for its bad lighting and loud crowds. "I'm playing tomorrow, Friday night. It's my last show in this city before I head south. Come and see what I do when I'm not hiding in your corner booth. Come and see the noise I make." She slid the flyer across the damp counter. I stared at the black and white ink, the thought of a crowded bar, the smell of beer, the judging eyes. It felt like a physical weight on my chest. I opened my mouth to say no, to give her a polite excuse about closing shifts and inventory, but she stood up before I could speak. "Don't answer now," she said, picking up her suitcase. "Just think about it. If you don't show up, I'll know the vault won. But if you do, I'll show you why the music is worth the scratch." She left a napkin behind that night, but it wasn't a poem. It was a single word written in jagged, desperate letters. "Listen." I spent the rest of my shift in a daze. The Thea I had built, the quiet girl, the invisible artist, was trembling. I looked at my hands. They were steady as I poured a latte for a late-night student, but inside, I was a mess of static. I kept thinking about the way she looked when she said coffin. I looked around at my cozy, amber-lit cafe. For the first time, the walls felt close. The scent of coffee felt like a shroud. That night, I didn't go straight to sleep. I sat in my small apartment and played the blues record she had noticed. I listened to the scratch. I listened to the loop. I realized that Romy hadn't just walked into my shop. She had walked into my head and turned up the volume on everything I had been trying to mute. I held the silver plectrum she had given me, the metal cool against my palm. I wasn't just a barista. I was a person who had forgotten how to be heard. Friday morning was the longest day of my life. Every customer felt like an intrusion. Every steam hiss felt like a warning. I kept the flyer in my pocket, the paper growing soft and warm from the heat of my leg. By 6 o'clock, the rain started again, a torrential downpour that blurred the world outside. I stood at the window, watching the neon signs bleed into the puddles. At 7 o'clock, she didn't come. The shop was empty. The bell stayed silent. I realized then that the game was over. She had issued her final challenge, and now it was my move. I could stay here, in the amber glow, safe and silent. Or I could go into the rain and find out if I was more than just a ghost in a vintage sweater. I looked at the espresso machine. I looked at the closed sign. My heart was thumping a frantic, syncopated beat. I reached out, my hand hovering over the light switch. "One more song," I whispered to the empty room. I flipped the switch, plunged the cafe into darkness, and stepped out into the cold, wet night. The rain hit my face like a slap, but for the first time in years, I didn't pull up my hood. I just started to walk. The bar was a cavern of bad decisions and loud neon. It smelled of stale beer and desperation. a world away from my sterile, scented sanctuary. I stood at the edge of the crowd, a shadow in an oversized sweater, feeling the bass pulse in my teeth. This was the noise Romy lived in. This was the chaos she invited. I scanned the room, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. I saw her on the tiny, elevated stage. She looked different under the harsh blue spotlights. She looked sharp, dangerous, and incredibly lonely. She held her guitar like a shield, her obsidian hair plastered to her forehead. She was tuning a string, her fingers moving with a frantic, shaky energy I hadn't seen at the cafe. The crowd didn't care. They were shouting over her, clinking glasses, oblivious to the woman about to pour her soul onto the floorboards. I wanted to scream at them to be quiet. I wanted to tell them they were missing the only real thing in the room. Romy leaned into the microphone. Her eyes were glazed, searching the dark corners of the room. She looked defeated. She began to play a slow, jagged melody, but her voice cracked on the first note. The room didn't fall silent. It stayed loud, drowning her out. She faltered, her hand slipping on the fretboard, a discordant screech echoing through the speakers. "I can't," she whispered into the mic, a sound so small it barely registered. She lowered her head. The bravado finally shattered. I couldn't stay back. I pushed through the sea of leather and denim, ignoring the shoves and the glares. I reached the edge of the stage and slammed my hand onto the wooden edge. "Romy, listen," I yelled, my voice cracking with the effort of being heard. She looked down. When our eyes met, the static in the room seemed to vanish. The blue light caught the silver in my nose, and for a second, she just stared, as if I were a hallucination born from too much caffeine and not enough sleep. "Thea," she breathed. "Play the song, Romy," I said, my voice gaining a strength I didn't know I possessed. "Play the one from the napkin, the one about the girl in the basement. I'm listening. I'm right here." A slow, transformative light returned to her eyes. It wasn't the spark of a performer. It was the warmth of a person who had finally been found. She straightened her back, adjusted her grip, and struck a chord so pure and resonant it sliced through the bar's chatter like a hot knife through wax. "This is for the girl who sees the secrets in the steam," she announced, her voice a low, commanding alto that demanded attention. The bar went silent, not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice. She started to sing, and it was a revelation. It wasn't the polished jazz of a record. It was a raw, bleeding blues that told the story of every mile she'd traveled and every bridge she'd burned. And in every line, I heard myself. I heard the girl hiding behind the espresso machine, the girl who was afraid to speak, the girl who had finally stepped into the rain. I stood there, drenched and trembling, as her voice wrapped around me like a velvet shroud. She wasn't singing to a crowd anymore. She was singing to me. Every note was a conversation, every lyric a bridge we were building in real time. The vault was open. The dust sheet was gone. As she hit the final, soaring note, the room erupted in applause. But we didn't hear it. We were locked in a gaze that felt like a permanent record. She stepped off the stage, ignoring the people trying to touch her arm, and walked straight to me. She didn't say a word. She just took my hand, her fingers interlocked with mine, and led me out the back door into the cooling night. The rain had slowed to a mist. We stood in the alleyway, the neon sign of the bar flickering red and gold above us. "You came," she said, her chest heaving. "I thought I'd pushed you too hard. I thought I'd lost the only quiet place I had left." "I didn't come for the quiet, Romy," I said, stepping closer. "I came for the noise. I think I've had enough silence to last a lifetime." She reached up, her thumb brushing the damp hair away from my face. Her touch was no longer restless. It was steady, grounded. "Then let's make a sound, Thea. Let's make something that people can't ignore." She leaned in, And this time, there was no steam to hide behind. The alleyway was a canyon of shadows, but the air between us was electric. The silence was no longer a wall. It was a sanctuary. Romy's hand was still in mine, her grip tight, as if she were afraid I'd vanish back into the steam of my basement. We walked back to the Needle and Bean, in a daze, the city sounds muffled by the rhythm of our breathing. Every step felt like a bridge being crossed, a distance being closed that had existed since the moment she first walked through my door. The rain had slowed to a shimmering mist, turning the streetlights into soft, golden orbs that guided us back to the only place that felt real. When I unlocked the door, the familiar scent of roasted beans greeted us like an old friend, but the atmosphere had shifted. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. The clinical brightness of the day had no place here. I only flipped the switch for the small lamp behind the counter and the warm, glowing tubes of the record player. The cafe looked different in the dark. It didn't look like a cage anymore. It looked like a recording studio waiting for its final session. The shadows stretched long across the floor, dancing between the stacks of vinyl and the chrome of the espresso machine. "I have to go tomorrow," Romy said, her voice barely a whisper as she leaned against the mahogany counter. Her silhouette was framed by the amber light, looking more like a spirit than a woman. "The tour doesn't wait for endings, Thea. The next city is already calling, and I've stayed in one place far longer than I intended. I'm a creature of the road, and the road is getting restless." I felt a sharp, cold pang in my chest, a physical ache that threatened to pull me back into the quiet, safe vault I had inhabited for years, but I didn't let it take hold. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw that while she had to leave, she wasn't leaving me behind. I walked to the record player and pulled out a blank acetate disc I had kept for a special occasion, a rare gift from a regular who knew I loved the archives. I set it on the vintage recording lathe, a heavy piece of equipment I had spent months restoring with obsessive care. "Then, leave something behind," I said, meeting her eyes with a steadiness that surprised even me. "Not a napkin, not a pick, not a memory that will fade with the first sunrise. Leave a song, a real one, something that will stay in this basement long after the rain has dried." Romy looked at the machine, then at me. She understood the weight of the request. She took her guitar from its battered case, the wood gleaming with a deep, soulful luster in the dim light. I set the levels, my hands moving with the precision of a surgeon. I adjusted the microphone, bringing it close to her lips, feeling the heat radiating from her skin. "Sing for me, Romy. Not for a crowd, not for a paycheck, just for the girl who sees you." She began to play. It wasn't the loud, desperate blues of the bar, and it wasn't the chaotic jazz of a traveler. It was a soft, intricate melody that sounded like coffee beans falling into a hopper, like the first drop of rain on a tin roof, like the heart of a girl who had finally decided to be seen. Her voice was a low, steady hum, weaving through the shadows of the room, filling the cracks in the walls and the gaps in my soul. I watched the needle of the lathe carve the groove into the rotating disc, a physical manifestation of her spirit being etched into the black surface. It was a permanent record of a moment that could never be repeated. Every note she sang felt like a confession. She sang about the sticker-covered suitcase and the cities that didn't want her. She sang about the red lipstick she used as armor and the songs she had lost in the noise of the world. And then she sang about the girl with the cocoa hair and the silver in her nose. She sang about the steam and the silence and the way a single cup of coffee could feel like an anchor in a storm. I stood there, mesmerized, watching the shavings of acetate curl away from the needle like dark ribbons of time. When she finished, the silence was absolute. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. I stopped the lathe and carefully lifted the disc. It was still warm to the touch, vibrating with the energy of her performance. I placed it on the turntable and dropped the needle, letting the raw, unedited sound fill the room. Romy closed her eyes, listening to her own voice, as if hearing it for the first time, without the filter of her own fear. We stood there, between the espresso machine and the vinyl stacks, as the song played out. It was our secret, captured in a circle of plastic and sound. "I'll be in San Francisco by Monday," she said, her voice steady now, though her eyes were wet. "But I'm leaving my heart in this basement. Can you keep it safe for me, Thea? Can you keep it warm when the nights get too long?" I reached out and tucked a stray lock of her dark hair behind her ear, my fingers lingering on her skin. "I'll do better than that, Romy. I'll make sure it's the first thing I hear every morning. I'll make sure it's the last thing I hear before I close the doors. You aren't leaving a ghost behind. You're leaving a pulse." The sun began to bleed through the high windows, turning the gray dust motes into dancing specks of gold. The morning was coming, and with it, the reality of the world outside. But the Thea who would open the doors today wasn't the one who had closed them last night. The vault had been opened, and the light was pouring in. Romy picked up her suitcase, its stickers a testament to a life spent searching. She walked to the door and paused, her hand on the brass handle. She didn't look back, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She was waiting for one last sound. "See you in the next song, Thea. I'll be listening, homie. I'll always be listening." The bell chimed, a clear silver note that echoed in the empty cafe. She was gone, a flash of red and black in the morning mist. I stood in the center of the shop, the silence returning, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full of potential. I walked to the counter and picked up the record we had made. I placed it in a plain white sleeve and wrote a single word on the front in bold black ink: "Awake." I turned on the espresso machine. I heard the familiar hiss of the steam, the rhythmic grind of the beans. But as I prepared the first cup of the day, I realized I wasn't hiding anymore. I was waiting. I was a girl of cocoa hair and silver rings, and I had finally learned that the most beautiful art isn't the one you keep in a vault. It's the one you have the courage to share with someone who knows how to hear it. I poured the milk, my hand steady, my heart open, and on the surface of the coffee, I didn't draw a bird or a cloud or a shattered record. I drew a sunrise, a bright, radiating star that filled the cup. I realized then that while Romy was a song, I was the one who provided the music. We were two tracks on the same record, spinning together in the dark, waiting for the needle to find us. I smiled, a real, honest smile that reached my eyes, and as the first customer walked in, I didn't look away. I looked them right in the eye and said, "What can I make for you today?" The music was playing, the coffee was hot, and for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was supposed to be.